9/11.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. I read the stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? Pistols and fondle slap of choice, I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two together whenever I try to prove out. It's not. You expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions. Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of.
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from FEMA Region 2-3 within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for...
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is certainly that. We are live on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli, as if you didn't know. Okay, so of course I want to welcome everybody who was listening on the live stream, who was listening on the other alternative ways to catch the stream besides the home web page or the wonderful page at ucy.tv/TOE. All of you are in the chat room. I'm not looking at the chat room right now because you guys know why, but, bottom line is thank you for listening. Of course, we are confronted by an interesting day today, the 13th anniversary of the attacks on the United States. And yes, they were attacks on the citizenry. They were attacks on our country. They were attacks. Now, they were also terrorist attacks. Now, depending on who it is you describe as the terrorists, well, that's a whole other story, isn't it? So, I'm going to begin. I'm going to have a lot of people on tonight, hopefully, and this should be an interesting change of pace for me because normally I focus on one guest and just, pick them apart and do it my way, and I think I've made some interesting points over time with some very diverse individuals. But tonight, it is going to be a little different. Richard Gage at one point is scheduled to call in and give me an update on what's going on in New York City. Jack Blood said he will do his best to join me, so hopefully he will be on. Of course, being messaged via Skype right now by a few other people, and who knows exactly who will join. Let's see now. I'll just begin with my own origin story about this. I've kind of told this story before, but let's really dig deep as to where my head was at on the morning of September 11, 2001, because I was definitely not awake. I was definitely not aware of exactly how deep the rabbit holes go regarding our government, regarding the deceptions, regarding the strategies of evil that seem to proliferate the entire scene, as it were, in my world. September 11th has never been a good day for me anyway. Quite honestly, September 11th, 2001 was the 25th anniversary of the day that my father's life ended in 1976 under strange circumstances, which I will eventually do a program on. But oddly enough, this is one of those things where, it was September 11th when he died. So for me, this was a solemn day to begin with, and I still recognize it as a solemn day. I say that before we go on with anything else tonight, that I have the utmost reverence for those who lost their lives, which is why I believe that the truth must be told, which is why I believe that justice must be served in the consciousness of the people. As I commented on Jack Blood's show earlier, which thank you for letting me on there just to make that comment, Jack, the bottom line is that the more that we fight with each other about these particular theories, the more we engage in all of these really rigorous and sometimes ridiculous debates, the less we seem to be focusing on the true criminals here. The less we seem to be focusing on the reality of what actually occurred that day. Now, I noted earlier today that MSNBC, which is, obviously part of the NBC networks, et cetera, they did one of those, as it happened kind of things and replayed that footage from that morning, or at least part of it. Now, I was engaged in listening to radio at that time, and I was trying to go to work and get through my day, because my day started at 6 a.m. at work on that day. But as I said, I had on my mind my father's death and things like this, which I was engaged really actively at that point in time in trying to investigate and trying to uncover the truth regarding that as well. And quite honestly, I was swept up in the fervor. I completely bought the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, that we had been attacked by these terrible Arab extremists of one kind or another. There was much pandemonium that day regarding the newscasts, regarding the information that was coming out. There was supposedly a bombing at the Capitol. There was a car bombing that occurred elsewhere, which later proved to be false. There was the actual collapse, the disappearance of the towers live on television. There was chaos, really, and I had been surrounded at that point in time by military bases, and I saw the change in posture among the military in the state of New Jersey. Now, the next thing that I engaged myself in was trying to help people. Firstly, they closed off the island of Manhattan, and we're letting some people in, but only really emergency workers that had to prove themselves to be valuable at that time. Many people from New Jersey made it across the river and got themselves into Manhattan to help. I was one of the people that went there to volunteer as a civilian and was turned away. In turn, over the next few days, though, I did wind up sending supplies and things to individuals who were there engaged in trying to save lives, trying to recover bodies, trying to do something on the ground. So this is very personal. This is not a matter of some sort of disconnected thing that I've learned about on YouTube. This is not a matter of, speculation on my part. Did this ever even happen? Nothing like that. I'm not here to tell you the no planes, no buildings theory. I'm not here to tell you the, ridiculousness of this and that and the third thing. This is not what I'm about, because I could smell the destruction from across the river. At any rate, this is where it was at for me. And I noted, like I said, with that MSNBC presentation earlier today, which was supposed to be run, chronologically at the same time of day that the actual footage had occurred, though they did block out the original chronological showing of the time and all that, which I did note as well. They were showing the original stuff where they claimed that the Palestinians were celebrating in the streets and all of this, which, unless memory serves me incorrectly, I think they had to retract at some point, but nobody bothered to pay attention to the daylight being exhibited in those films of these supposed celebrations and everything else. We had a great many different reports coming in, and it was also amazing to see that within less than 3 hours they were already talking about the bin Laden narrative, which, again, up to that point he had not been one of the prime movers, let's just say, when it came to these things outside of the supposed bombing of the U.S. coal and all of these other things. And you know what? I don't know. I don't know when it comes to that stuff, because it's very difficult to unravel when people that are involved in the intelligence community, as Bin Laden, Osmond, whoever, it's very difficult to unravel that stuff and the reality of who actually is responsible for some of these things. Of course, we know a lot about the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, etc., etc. Anyway, back to the chaos of that day and the news reports and everything else. There was a generalized sort of fear. There was the idea that we had no idea exactly what was going to happen next. Was there more to follow? Were there more attacks coming? Were there more of our supposedly iconic structures that were going to be destroyed? Were they trying to decapitate the government itself by striking at the Pentagon? The possibility of striking at the White House, the attempted bombing of the Capitol, the evacuation of all these different sectors of the District of Semiramis as it stood. And meanwhile, we discover later, most of it is vaporous. And at this point, we still don't know exactly where that plane went in Shanksville, do we? We still don't know precisely what hit the Pentagon, because I don't know about you, but, maybe it's just because of my poor eyesight. But the thing is, if you examine the damage to the Pentagon, it doesn't appear as though a 757 or 747 or whatever large airliner that you want to conjure up could have possibly achieved such acrobatics in order to strike the Pentagon in the way they said it did. And also, you can't fit that plane into the hull, can you? But anyway, back to New York City. Of course, we figure out later, after the BBC reports that, Building 7 had collapsed well ahead of its collapse. We did see that building collapse later in the day, didn't we? And I've even stated this before. There was a structure in between where the towers collapsed and Building 7, which should have, and I think to the best of my knowledge, actually did absorb a great deal of the ejected debris from the towers, and really should have shielded Building 7 from any sort of major significant damage. And yet that building fell later on that day, didn't it? Let's not even, mention the fact that the CIA, the Secret Service, Giuliani's actual true command center, plus many other interesting offices were contained within that building. One of the largest CIA offices outside of Langley, of course, right? But that has nothing to do with anything, does it? The missing gold, the insider trading, the oddity of what was recovered from all of those wonderful hard drives afterwards, the strange behavior, the put options, it just becomes rather depressing. And what I said on Jack's show is something that I mean, and that is that, when I think about it, and I had to come to this conclusion a bit later, I do admit that, and it took me a few years before I was really on board with it and trying to distribute, videos and fact sheets and illustrations and booklets myself, hand-to-hand with people in different communities. Before even any of that happened, I knew something was very, very wrong here, because why in the world did we need to go to Iraq? Well, this was perfectly acceptable to most of the population, will be nice, because after all, anybody with a towel on their head is pretty much a suspect. Well, that's what they told us anyway, right? Anyway, I'm also not satisfied necessarily with the 9/11 Truth Movement, because after all, and after these 13 years, better than a decade, we are still confronted with the inconclusive stuff, like Larry Silverstein saying, pull it. That could have meant anything regarding the context as far as I'm concerned. But let's just say that that's something valuable. Where does it go? Yes, he benefited. but so did so many others. Have you not looked at who actually made the money for the cleanup? Have you not looked at who actually made the money regarding, handling the different insurance policies outside of what Silverstein did? Does anybody bother to look at what went on ahead of time? Because, of course, I had a stepfather at the time who had been an electrician in those buildings. He had to retire not too long before that. Really nice guy. Died a few days after 9/11 happened because he was absolutely devastated by what he saw on the television and knew that he had lost friends. A good man who was completely shot up by that trauma-based programming that we were all confronted with for days and days. It was like an event. And it wasn't just like an event. It was an event. So those that have these theories that there were no planes, there were no people, there were no buildings, it's all just, high-res graphics. I really don't have a great deal of stomach for you. And for those that want to sit there and postulate all of these various theories about weaponry that is theoretical as far as I'm concerned, because after all, even though it's possible to utilize some of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that that was done in this case. You have greater amounts of evidence for a lot of other strange things. How do you get molten metal sitting under structures? How do you get elements in the dust? How does this happen? Well, does anybody bother to look at who was it that did the fireproofing ahead of time? Does anybody bother to look at the security arrangements, the changes in them? They mention them. But then again, who actually benefited? Was it just the military-industrial complex? Because, again, we had a greater excuse to go into multiple theaters of warfare, commit all sorts of acts against populations based on a theory. Because don't forget, one of the wildest and most outrageous conspiracy theories there is the one postulated by the United States government. But, of course, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Even though some of these guys, some of these 19 who are still held up, who are still shown, and 20 if you count Zacharias Muselli, some of these guys stood up and happened to be alive afterwards. And, a corrupt New York City police force that discovers a completely undamaged passport on the ground in Manhattan, well, that's not suspicious at all either, is it? No. How could it be? So, here's the deal today. I'm not going to ramble for 2 hours. That's not going to happen. I've only taken up about 15 minutes of your time, I think, so far. But how much more could I say? Well, a lot. Because like I said, in the JFK community, it's been so radically splintered that regardless of all the great work that has been done, it has been overshadowed by the nonsense, by the misdirection, by the squabbling over supposedly scientific minds, by a lack of unity to seek justice. Too many people wish to prove their own points instead of being part of the solution. And thusly, half a century later, the only trial was in the late 60s, brought by Jim Garrison. But there isn't going to be a trial here, I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, and trying to pin everything on George W. is also, in my opinion, a golden apple that nobody needs to pick up. Because again, if you understand what type of puppets these are at the higher levels, then how could you possibly say that this guy was involved in the planning or the execution? In fact, if anything, he was placed well out of the way so that the second highest officer responsible for military responses would be Donald Rumsfeld, below the president, obviously, and Well, he was on the scene at the Pentagon, wasn't he? Continuing with business as usual, despite the fact that, according to his own testimony, and by the way, Dylan tried to correct me on this, but I do believe, depending on how you read the chronology, 903 and 905 is the second strike on the towers. So, that is where I place it. That is where Rumsfeld's testimony to the 9/11 Commission places it. And, of course, he had nothing to worry about. He continued on with his meetings, regardless of the fact that on the opposite side of the building, it had been struck. Of course, there was a company which was charged with, doing renovations to that building. And that was conveniently an area which would have been responsible for certain financial transactions. Oh, don't forget that on September 10th, of course, there was a great deal of consternation regarding the idea that, I forget exactly how much it was, but I know it was something over $1 trillion had gone missing, depending on whose count you take. And, of course, the SEC, in an emergency action, and under the act of the Securities and Exchange Act, changed its standards regarding insider trading and stuff like that, so that a whole lot of securities could be exchanged a lot easier because of the chaos and all that stuff. But hey, that's got nothing to do with anything, does it? It wouldn't be, of any interest that they would allow that to come out exactly the day before, so that there would be no way in hell anybody would bother looking at that again. And even those involved in the 9/11 truth movement have seemed to ignore this. I mean, outside of just mentioning it as an aside, here's a suspicious thing, and that's it. Nobody digs into it to see where those securities came from, exactly what was exchanged, or anything else. Nobody bothers. Were all the records destroyed? No. It's still possible to look at these things. As of right now, I'm actually engaged in trying to get someone on my program who is going to tell me all about interesting chemicals which were introduced during many, many routine maintenance operations in the Twin Towers. And coincidentally, they happen to be in the areas, these interesting chemicals, happen to be in the areas where these plane strikes occur. Oh, you remember the plane strikes, right? They're the catalysts for the first time in history 3 steel-framed, cement-reinforced skyscrapers collapsed, had complete global failure in their structures, right? Coincidentally, all 3 of them collapsed on 9/11. Before or since this has not occurred, regardless of fires, regardless of the fact that many fires actually have occurred in structures similar to these, not quite built as well as these, and had burned longer and hotter and everything else, but yet there wasn't the complete catastrophic failure of the buildings. How interesting is that? Well, to me, that's pretty much the ball game. You're not looking at a random act of terrorism, although you are looking at an act of terrorism. There's nothing random about it. This is not some sort of sneak attack. This was not a new Pearl Harbor as they wanted exactly, but it has been portrayed that way, hasn't it? And I have to apologize again for not looking at it sooner, for being caught up in the xenophobic, patriotic, though it may be, but xenophobic nevertheless, desire to defend what I believed was mine. And again, I should have really known better, because after all, I was quite aware of exactly how much governments lie, how much the media lies, how much they are in bed with the intelligence communities. I should have at least looked at this whole thing as suspect, as I do now every time any story emerges. I mean, for God's sake, when you even look at, the whole NFL thing that's going around now, you think that's not some sort of distraction? Did anybody believe, because I said it from day one, that the whole Ukraine situation was actually going to explode into anything? No. You're being distracted again. Of course, now we are still feeling the residual effects of that day 13 years ago because, well, we don't have Al-Qaeda to decapitate anymore because we cut off the head of that imaginary boogeyman, didn't we? Oh, well, maybe we did. I mean, after all, his body was dumped at sea and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But ostensibly, the Al-Qaeda boogeyman is dead. So we needed a new one to continue on with the brush fire warfare, with the surrogate warfare, with the profiteering. So why not ISIS? Sure. And meanwhile, Notice what's announced right in front of your eyes. What does Obama say? Well, we're going to support moderate fighters. A repetitious pattern that seems to reoccur. I don't know, but it just seems pretty odd to me that support of the Mujahideen later on evolves into Al-Qaeda. But that's got nothing to do with anything, and after all of this is just an academic exercise, isn't it? Or is it? And none of this even mentions the idea that our freedoms at home are being taken away. Out of fear, most of the population has willingly accepted stuff like Patriot Act 1 and 2, the NDAA, the other sort of carried on things that were added on that were just tucked away into so many other pieces of legislature that they have right in front of your eyes terminated so many of your rights, made it difficult for free movement for many, many people. I mean, whether you're on a watch list like I am, or you're just Joe Citizen who's never made a single rough statement out in public or anything else. You've never made a single bit of trouble, but yet you are a suspect. And all of us are, aren't we? Always under surveillance. But that's okay, because I'm not doing anything wrong, Chuck. Really. So what happens? What happens when they start to judge certain things that you do as wrong? And not only that, but based on the surveillance state, I mean, none of us, and I don't know a single human being, although I've known some pretty intelligent individuals, I don't know one single person that knows every single law that they are subject to, depending on their locality. So at any point in time, just getting out of bed in the morning, you could easily be in violation of a law. Regardless of how just or constitutional that law is, you're constantly under surveillance, so all they have to do is decide to analyze that surveillance, and believe me, one way or another, you'll be a criminal. And that's whether you've made threats or you haven't made threats, or, whether you're just completely dissatisfied with the situation like I am. Do you guys think about that? So, I'm sure people are noting at this point that I am in an odd mood, and it will probably remain that way throughout the rest of this broadcast. My apologies, by the way, to Susan Posel, because I would have loved to have you on tonight, but I don't think we would have gotten to all of what you want to say in this program. Also, we're just about due for some other people to join in. And this is the way I see things, mind you. So, for those of you that wind up disagreeing with me or saying, look, the arrogant Ochelli guy is talking out of his backside once more, well, deal with it. Because I'll tell you what, if you were observing any of the media today, you were hit with all kinds of reinforcement of that fear-based programming, that trauma-based mind control, if you will, that is constantly out there. Be afraid, be very afraid, be terrified of your Middle Eastern people, especially now because ISIS. It all makes sense, you see. We're still fighting the war on terror 13 years later. You're fighting the war on an idea. Problem is that there are real bullets, real people, real profits to be made here, though, right? So again, with the utmost respect for the lives lost that day, for the lives lost since, for the freedoms lost since, for the pain inflicted upon what I believe still to be my country, I'm going to say what I'm going to say about this. And it's not going to all be just a bunch of conspiracy theory today. I don't want to do that. I could engage in that. I could sit here and just do that for God only knows how many hours I could engage in that. You know, I really haven't estimated it, but probably not quite as long as I can go on about the JFK subject. But then again, there's so much more to go over here. There's so much a larger crime that was committed and is still being committed. The longer this goes on, the more disinformation that is passed along, and the more that those of us who do have a legitimate care in our hearts and in our souls for the truth, the more that we participate in the squabbling, the more that we participate in the denial about the true nature of this whole thing, the more we don't understand that this was simply a criminal act, no matter how you slice it. And the more that we don't try and get to the bottom of it, the more damage we do by causing delays in what could be a valuable contribution to history. Otherwise, it'll be consigned to the same type of, history books that the Kennedy assassination has been, the same type of disinformation. I mean, after all, we are also approaching the 50th anniversary of when the Warren Commission came out. Of course, I like to point out that the 9/11 Commission learned from the Warren Commission's mistakes and didn't release any of its ridiculous evidence to go along with its ridiculous report. But of course, we also are approaching the 101st anniversary of the Federal Reserve coming into being, which of course the meeting, just by mere sheer coincidence, the original meeting for that was of course begun on November 22nd. But that's just another coincidence too, isn't it? Yeah, the 101st anniversary of that, we need to take them to school, that's for sure. We need to give them the 101 on what real people that aren't slaves decide to do. But of course, I'm speaking off topic, or am I? Anyway, I say this, I'm going to do the best I can here, and we shall see where this goes. Mr. Gage is running behind on me, so I'll tell you what, anybody who is looking to join in, I know I had a few takers that wanted to come on with me tonight and simply discuss their viewpoint about it. I'd be more than happy to take you in until Mr. Gage joins in, and then I want to get that update from him. So feel free to call in. The number is, of course, 718-717-8296. Or if you have me on your Skype list, just call me and I will drop you in. Don't know how long I will keep you on for, but we shall see. We'll just make it up as we go along and discuss this. Some interesting people may pop in later, and we'll see exactly who has time at this time of day. I was originally going to try and do this in a 4-hour format, but that didn't quite pan out, so we will go on with just the 2 hours that I have. So like I said, join me if you want to. If you're on my Skype list, just call and I'll pick you up and add you in. And otherwise, 718-717-8296. And I'll also add you in. Meanwhile, let's just hope that time is not going to be a problem for everybody. Okay. Just checking my little Skype messages there. And we shall see who else comes on. Okay, you're on the air.
Hey, Chuck, this is Michael.
How you doing, Michael?
Not too bad. I feel that any discussion of 9/11, all the horrors of that day and the heroes and the towers and all this is incomplete without a lengthy discussion on the dancing Israelis.
Could you speak up just a little bit, Michael, because I'm not really hearing you all the way.
I said that any discussion of 9/11, the towers and the heroes and all this noise that is completely rammed through our skulls on a yearly basis now and actually on a daily basis is incomplete without a lengthy discussion of the dancing Israelis.
Okay.
5 Israelis were captured, arrested by the police department, New York Police Department. After citizen tips, people saw them videotaping the towers and laughing and joking and dancing and high-fiving and holding Zippo lighters up, kind of, with the smoking towers behind them. Kind of like how people take a picture of pushing the leaning tower of Pisa up. They were doing that with Zippo lighters and the burning towers behind them. They were caught. They had several passports. They had a bunch of cash, and they repeatedly told the arresting officers that they were Israeli and they were not Palestinian. The Palestinians are your problems, not them. They were kept incommunicado for about, 73 days, and then they were shipped out, nothing further. And then they go on TV in Israel, and they give interviews, and basically they say they were there to document the event, which begs the question, how do they know the event was going to happen?
Right, and to understand this, of course, I don't know how else to put it except that you're looking at Mossad assets one way or another. I don't know enough to call them agents, but assets at the very least, right?
I would say so. In the interview, they said that they were being questioned as to whether or not they were members of Mossad. That was something from the interview, but really, that's really all you got to know about 9/11. Somebody knew about it before. Our government says that they had no idea it was going to happen, blah, 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 but the Israelis knew. And I'll tell you what, just for, if nothing else, we give them $3 billion a year. Cut us a solid, We give you $3 billion a year and you can't tell us this is coming and you know about it? Sorry.
Yeah, you know what? I hear you on this. The only thing is I'll postulate this to you and see what you think. Mossad, as well as many other intelligence agencies, work in collaboration with one another. It is very, very possible that although they may not have been the ignition on this, that they were simply made aware. I think a lot of intelligence agencies were well aware that this was going to happen. Nothing really happens in this world without...
That may be. That very well may be. But we didn't arrest any German GSG agents. We didn't arrest any Canadian CSIS agents. We didn't arrest any Pakistani ISI agents. We didn't arrest any Mexican, the BFI. We did not arrest any of them. We arrested Israelis.
And I grant you that, but the thing is, the totality of the arrest records that day and the detentions that were made actually is not fully out in the public record at this point. Do you know that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, aside from the 28 pages that are missing from that final report, that that was a topic for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
In the last week, but yeah, there's really no records relating to the arrest of the Israelis. That's against the interests of national security.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting right there? Because, realistically, if we have foreign agents on our soil, regardless of whatever it is they're conducting, I mean, how could it be part of our national security to reveal that they were detained, et cetera, unless we're already shaking hands with them and we have an agreement with them. So, You know, this is part of my point about this, is that, you know, as much as I'm very willing to say that the Mossad was involved here, I really point the dirty end of the stick a whole lot more at the people that are right here with us still.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've got people making our laws for us, setting policy and procedures for our nation that have dual citizenship with Israel.
That's true.
Our wars in the Middle East, you really got to kind of look at it as who benefits from all this. Everything since 9/11, and actually on September 12th, 2001, in Haaretz, which is that big newspaper out of Israel, one of the main headlines was Netanyahu saying how Israel is going to benefit from the United States war on terror. They're the only ones who benefited from it. The contractors and the banks, you know.
Right. Hold on just a second, Michael. 926, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Richard Gage.
Richard. I was waiting for you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and I'm sorry that I'm late. I had a situation with a phone number. We're here in New York. We just had the New York premiere of Anatomy of a Great Deception in the East Village, and we had well over 100 people here. So it was very exciting to release this new film, The Ultimate Red Pill, for those who just refuse to believe or won't look at the evidence.
Well, absolutely, and there's been other developments that I'd kind of like to cover with you really quickly, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You've been involved. Of course, the high-rise safety initiative was going on there for quite a while. There was also some other recent developments with architects and engineers that I wanted to kind of get your take on real quick, because I know your time is very short.
Yeah, and I apologize for that, too. It's pinched on both ends here. The high-rise safety initiative is very exciting for us because we have 100,000 New Yorkers who put their name on an initiative demanding that we put on the ballot a measure for the voters to choose that any high-rise building that collapses gets investigated because Building 7 was never investigated. This building is a 47-story skyscraper that collapsed straight down uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint and a free-fall acceleration. And, of course, that means controlled demolition, and that's exactly what it looked like. But officials blame normal office fires. And these office fires have never brought down a skyscraper in the history of skyscrapers. So here we certainly need a real investigation. And the evidence actually does show thermite incendiaries. Evidence provided by officials, in fact, and very well documented by them, but not very well explained.
Well, right, and in addition, now I have said this before, and I maybe you can prove me wrong because I know you've looked at this, but there was another building which was in the way, let's just say, of the debris that should have struck Building 7 had it gone on a straight trajectory from the towers, right?
Yes, Building 6 was in between the two buildings, but it wasn't nearly as high, only 4 or 5 stories tall. So lots of the beams that were ejected, freely flying, by the way, structural steel sections weighing over 4 tons, ejected laterally out of the towers, explosively, 70 miles an hour, landing 600 feet in every direction, including on Building 7. But that was not a cause of its collapse.
Mm. So this has always been the thing, too, is that with anyone who looks at this for the first time and tries to examine it, Building 7 is one of those things that we often bring up because it is just so obvious that that something is very, very wrong here.
Yes, absolutely. Once people realize that we've been lied to by officials, by our government, by the media about Building 7, and that we realize that Building 7 was a controlled demolition, then we start to say, well, what about the Twin Towers? And I'm going to have to call you back in 10 minutes so we can talk about that. Sorry, guys. I'll call back and see if you're available then. Gotta go. Sorry. Bye.
Not a problem. Okay. Richard Gage, of course, Architects and Engineers for 9/11. And you can find them usually on the Ochelli Effect page. I definitely post stuff from A&E 9/11 on there. If anybody else wants to join in while I'm doing this broadcast, please do. I guess Richard is jumping around from different people and just trying to squeeze me in. So, hopefully we'll get him on some more. And in the meantime, please do call in. I didn't mean to cut Michael off so bad there. It's just that I was kind of waiting on Richard to join in. So, and Mike, very good points there. I only have that little bit of a problem here to lay it exactly at the foot of the Mossad entirely, because there had to have been more involved than that. I mean, we can't have the complete failure of our entire defense system, essentially, just from the Mossad's actions. Things like this. This is what the problem is as far as I'm concerned. But nonetheless, the dancing Israelis are a hell of a red flag. So, but there are many red flags here that day. The collapse of these buildings, as they did, the strangeness with which the debris ended up, the components of the debris, etc., etc., and of course, Building 7 is one of the things that we often mention. Now, I don't believe that any of this is theory, because after all, Richard Gage, who is AIA, take a look that up for yourself, and you can find out what that means exactly after his name. You'll see that this guy is not going off of some sort of conspiracy theories where he's examining grainy video only and just seeing the behavior of the towers from one particular angle or anything like that. The truth about the investigation into Building 7 is that there was none. The truth about the investigation into the towers, in my opinion, is that there was none. This is what we call a limited hangout. This is exactly what is done in any cover-up operation. Well, anyway, as I said before, feel free to join in, 718-717-8296, or if you have me on your Skype list, just hit me up and I will add you in as well. And I'm willing to listen to any viewpoints here. It's just a matter of I don't want to go too far into those outrageous conspiracy theories. Isn't that what he called it? Yeah, I think it was called an outrageous conspiracy theory, right? But that's what Bush said anyway. But Bush, of course, you can't get hostile with your enemies and all that too, right? That was a funny clip I heard the other night. I'd forgotten all about that. And of course, we have the much improved, public speaking skills when it comes to the supposed President Barry there, and all the better to push forward yet another construct of the intelligence communities and the people that we previously armed for one reason or another, because, of course, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, at least this week until next week, when we decide that we need to take them out and pop up yet again another enemy of our enemy, and the cycle continues on, doesn't it? ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. Previous to that, I mean, the PLO was the big boogeyman, but once people figured out that they were really mainly focused on, their own local problems, and they weren't looking to expand or anything like that, well, they weren't very useful as a boogeyman, But that's just my opinion, of course, and believe me when I say this, I have no compunction about laying plenty of criminal blame on the criminal state, and I do say criminal for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 100th time regarding the state of Israel. But again, just my opinion, right? So, I've got another caller. Colby, how you doing, man?
Not too bad, Charles. What's going on?
Well, just doing my 9/11 thing here, and intermittently getting different people on, and glad you could join me.
I'm glad I could join you myself. It actually sounds like a really good show so far. A lot of points that you talk about, a lot of things like the Federal Reserve also. I mean, does anyone realize that, you and I talked about a lot of this earlier, but we've been in a status of war for over 100 years now. And that only took place when we entered World War I, 4 years after the creation of what? The Act of 13 or 14?
1913, yep.
The Act of 1913. 4 years later, boom, 1917.
Yeah,
we have been in war since then.
It was signed into law, I think, it was December, a few days before Christmas in December of 1913. Yeah. I'm sure if everybody looks that up, they can get the exact day. It was either the 22nd, 23rd, or even maybe the 24th, but I know it was just before Christmas that year.
Well, ever since then, though, we've economically had a lot of issues back and forth, and what, in my opinion, what I've seen is the best example of this would be the Clinton era, because right before the Clinton era, we took Saddam Hussein out in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and what we did was, it's not confirmed or denied, so I guess it is a theory. There are photos of giant rooms full of gold and halos of cash from different actual places. And, I mean, back then the dinar was, 10 to 1 over the dollar in Iraq?
Yeah, I believe the exchange rate was like that previous to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, et cetera, et cetera. But even afterwards, there was still value in the Iraqi money, all the way up until we, of course, made yet another incursion in there when Junior was in office, right?
Roger, yeah, we came back in then, and then it, when I was there in 2009, I know it was like a $200 could get me a couple grand in Iraqi money because it was just so devalued. But I mean, they pretty much had a different economy. I don't know how their economy was. I haven't looked into it personally, but I know that it was prosperous, but it was very tyrannical at the same time. It was, but I mean, everyone says, "Oh, we got to get a Democrat in office because Clinton was a prosperous president." Why was Clinton a prosperous president?
Well, generally speaking, realistically, the president that's usually credited with the prosperity or the the increases in wealth and what have you, usually is the guy who is inheriting the policies of the previous administration, which is kind of funny in of course Clinton's case because he did get all that credit, and meanwhile it was probably the and I hate to even say this because I really have a terrible feeling in my stomach whenever I have to say something nice about the Bushes, to be honest with you. But H.W. there probably set the stage for that, his regime, as it were. But, in my mind, I'm at the point of not really having any use for either side of this paradigm because they all seem to work for the same interests, and they're all being given money by the same people, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I'm at with it, to be honest with you. But generally speaking, historically speaking, the president who's in office, who is usually credited for the great achievements ad nauseum, is usually not the guy who's actually responsible for them. That's for certain.
Well, and I'm kind of seeing a disuse for both sides as well because you can't bring them together, and then there's so many fringe groups in the middle of both sides that it's oblivious at some points, but you got to work within what you can work within, and because of the two-party system as we have it now, it's kind of horrible if you want to work within. But it still is though interesting that we always do this, like, oh, Clinton was a great president, and people buy all these lies, just like all of a sudden ISIS is an Islamic group. The first I stands for Islamic. Now we have a president saying this on stage, and he just walks away with it. And some people are chastising, which they should. But like you were saying, I mean, how long do we actually have to go through this? We arm someone to go against someone. They get too big for their britches, and we come in with our fly swatter and say, no, 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 we will drone you. Because that's all that's been happening for, 20-plus years now?
And that's the thing. This is exactly what the problem is. I mean, before we had the omnipotent boogeyman, which was the Soviet Union. So all we had to do is state that any place where we wanted to, involve ourselves, whether it be Vietnam or elsewhere. Previous to that, there was Laos and a whole lot of other stuff that they don't teach you about in your history books. But, of course, to involve ourselves in that situation, we had the boogeyman of the Soviet Union. Ever since the supposed collapse of the Soviet Union and the reformation into the Russian Federation, we now don't have that very same boogeyman. So a new one needed to be constructed. And yes, it's very valuable to point out that once again we are faced with people we armed one way or another in a surrogate type warfare state, trying to make the enemy of our enemy our friend for a little while until they, again, become too big for their britches, like you said. And then, of course, now they become the enemy. And what did they automatically say here? What was the immediate call to do here as far as I could pick up? I mean, I really could not face too much of the mainstream. But trying to look at Obama's comments, we're going to arm, quote, moderates over there to face off with ISIL, whatever you want to call them. Doesn't that seem just like the definition of insanity, continuously repeating the same actions and expecting a different result? How long will it be before we give a moniker to these, quote, moderates, end quote, and then have to turn against them as well, right?
It's a continued cycle, though. I mean, we keep doing this. We get into a situation where we're not having prosperity economically, and we're losing jobs, and we're losing our entire economic structure, and we're just deading ourselves into oblivion. But at the same time, we're giving all this money to other countries, and we can't take care of our own. I mean, it's a systemic problem we have with government, and it's honestly something the founders warned about. Do not incorporate yourself into foreign matters, and that's a paraphrase. But at the same time, it rings in volume. When we actually jump into the foreign matters, we're only enslaving ourselves to someone else's need. And all we've done is become the world police, and at the same time become the backdoor world police through propping up things like the Taliban, Mujahideen. I mean, this goes back before Iran-Contra, I'm sure, and it could probably go back even farther if we really wanted to dig into it and there was truth behind it, you'd find it. But we know at least back to Iran-Contra, we've had this same problem. And it just continues to grow larger and larger, and we continue doing the same thing. And honestly, in my opinion, it's like, what are we doing? We can't even sustain our own country. We've got 46% of our citizens on food stamps, but we're shelling out billions of dollars to other countries to help them. It doesn't compute. We can't close our borders, and it's not that the people shouldn't have the right to freely travel. It's the fact that the people shouldn't have the right to steal from people that are legally here or trying to come here legally. Taxation is theft, and that's the problem. If we didn't have the welfare state, we would be good and full. Open the border. That's cool. I'm for it. But we have the welfare state, so we're totally botched on having an open border. It shouldn't happen on either side of it. Canada's got too much money, though. They just throw that stuff all over the place with socialism, so...
Well, yeah, and of course, the added benefit, as someone once explained to me regarding the Vietnam conflict, the added benefit, of course, is to cut down on the population a bit, or at least the eligible population, because this is what my main concern is. Of course, regarding our own citizens, we put them in harm's way for what is essentially the reshuffling of the financial deck, as far as I'm concerned. Has very little to do with human rights or human decency or defending the rights of others. It just more has to do with the expansion of the American empire and people's profit margins. This is what I see anyway. And this is where I'm at. I've just added in Vince Easley if he...
Hey, Chuck, good to be with you. Yeah, I believe I'm still here. Hey, what Colby said, just backing up, 100 years ago back to when the Federal Reserve was founded, and just take a look at how the money powers have, kind of shifted the weapons around, causing wars false flags events have been the norm. We see it just an example with the Maine and with Cuba. So these money powers aren't loyal to any country, and we get a false sense of patriotism out of this 9/11, which is, just a furtherance of, the powers that Wall Street, funded with World War II. Then, it was supposed the Nazis were defeated, but actually, we incorporated them into America, and then this neocon movement that has really absurd. Even the de facto government that existed then, but a definite coup d'etat amongst the de facto governments back in on the 9/11 event some 13 odd years ago now. So it was just so tremendous. I mean, you look at the look on Bush's face when the guy comes up to him when he's in the school there and tells him, and his expressions is like, "Oh man, we're so going to be busted, man." But yeah, it's a definite sellout, and there's just too many anomalies that just show that this couldn't have just happened by these supposed terrorists, and just I've spent the day really in review on this, just a confirmation for myself, and everything adds up to a definite conspiracy. So theories I think are long past
I believe that puts me back on. Boy, oh boy. One problem after another today. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Hey, have no idea why everything just dropped away there. But let's see if we can bring everybody back in. Best I can, anyway. Ay, ay, ay. You know, one of those fun facts, as soon as you start to discuss certain things, it all seems to collapse on us, doesn't it? Ah, buddy. Let's see now. Let's see if we can bring Colby back in. Hey. You there?
I'm on here.
Alrighty. I have no idea. Have no idea why that happened. One of those fun days. But anyway, got lost there for a minute. And okay. Yes, I see that I'm back on. Thank you. Thank you to people trying to message me. I did not realize what happened there. It just seemed to say that there was a problem with the connections altogether, and they all went away all at once. So hopefully I didn't lose all you guys out there, because we're still discussing this. Did you just about ready there, Colby?
For, sir.
All right. I was wondering if you had anything to say about what Vince was saying.
I don't get into some of the talk. I think that really the key point is we've got to, as a nation, we've got to really get things together. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Right now we've got Democrats and Republicans beating the drums of war again. But it's because they're upset, they're mad, they're out of work. I mean, they're dealing with life. They're not having a good time. The housing market's horrible, you know. I mean, the list goes on and on. People are ready for war right now. But the problem is that Bad Religion song every time brings me back to this, let them eat war. Because that's exactly how you ration the poor. When we're having prosperous times, or horribly not prosperous times, it's dependent. We could have a low army under Clinton, like we did, and don't need them, because we don't have to occupy it. But when we hit a recession like this, which invading Afghanistan and invading Iraq, again, was supposed to be a prosperous thing where we were pretty much going to make out with some stuff. There's nothing there in Afghanistan, though. And we already plundered Iraq, so financially, we're not going to gain anything from that. And that's exactly what happened. And in a sense, I can say that, yeah, Bush shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have. I went to both theaters, and I tell you what, I mean, I've got a distrust for Islam, because one day they're talking the market, the next day they're blowing themselves up. It's not a pretty religious background. Not all of them are like that, I will say that. A lot of them are really good people. But it's a twisted religion. So you've got to watch yourself with that, for one. But the simple fact is it our problem? Besides the fact that we prop them up with ISIL or ISIS or whatever their name is now, we prop them up financially. That's the only part that's our problem. Just like it was in Afghanistan. We had to go in because we made the problem during the Cold War to piss off Russia.
Well, see, this is my objection to the expansion of the American empire, basically, because, look, there's a couple of things that are worth mentioning here. One is that now, because of the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, we do have a legitimate population which is not happy with us, okay? Anti-American sentiment may be legitimate, for certain reasons. I mean, how many times can you stomp over somebody's homeland, regardless of how bad the dictator is, before the people get pissed? I mean, let's be honest. That's one thing. The next thing is that, of course, we're not profiting. There's been no prosperity gained from this, greater than a decade of warfare and adventure over there, because we're not meant to profit. Only the people that are, rebuilding things and making the equipment that's necessary to continue on with these protracted events is going to make the money. This is part of the problem I have with it. And then, in addition, what is the point of being in 160 some odd countries? Why are we still in parts of Europe, 50, 60, 70 years after the events that we were supposedly there to monitor and things like this? To me, this has been and this has been perpetrated by both sides of that paradigm. That again, like I said, I have no use for either side of any longer because they seem to be on the same side. I mean, have the protracted events of warfare, invading other countries, or involving ourselves in places where, in my opinion, we don't belong, has any of that changed? Depending on who is actually occupying the Congress or the White House? No. So that's just the way I see it. And I don't know what else to say about it, except that the expansion of the American empire has done nothing now but cost us here at home. In an economic sense, in a moral sense, you name it. So I know I got Vince back now. You with me, Vince?
I am. And I'd like to take a look at the events on 9/11. So I mean, so many things happen that would never normally happen. A lot of the heads of departments they temporarily step down. Everybody's conveniently in their place. Rumsfeld is on the other side of the Pentagon. When the missile strikes, and look at where that hit. I said missile. It's supposed to have been a plane, but examination shows it could have only been a missile. That did strike that, and it has struck a place where the files, which previously Rumsfeld stated the day before that some $1.3 trillion that you were speaking about earlier went missing from the Pentagon, and this is where investigations were going on. Other paperwork, including financial records, which were lost in Building 7 that collapsed, I believe, some 7 hours later that day. Most people don't even realize that the third building fell, and all three buildings that fell that day were the first in history to fall from structural fires. Theories were put forth by NIST, Underwriters Laboratories, said that there's no way the pancake theory could have happened for the collapse. They then went to a SAG, and all of these were put forth with excruciating test, well beyond the parameters.
The inward Boeing theory, which followed the pancake theory, is what they ended up running with, I guess. And even based on their own computer models, they had to skew the numbers in order to get it to work.
Absolutely.
And
Vincent's point about the Pentagon, I don't believe their story either, man. I've been to an investigation on a Black Hawk helicopter that had dual external tanks and internal tanks, and we're talking a lot of JP4. A lot of JP4. In 3 minutes, the crew had to be out of there or they'd have been dead. It was that bad. And, I mean, honestly, 75% of the helicopter was still there. The transmission, the blades, and the engines were sitting in the cargo bay where they're not supposed to be. But, I mean, this is a 20,000-pound aircraft that turned into 75% after burning... What do we got? I think we got 3,000 internal and around the same externals. I think it's like 12,000 pounds of fuel max. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's pretty heavy.
Well, with the Pentagon, we see quite a bit of anomalies there. Where you got a 5-meter hole supposedly punched by a 160-foot wide plane, counting the wings. The hole punches through several of the walls, the rings of the Pentagon punches through there. Exteriorly, at the beginning, there's no indication of wing marks. Engines that have titanium alloy. They don't punch a hole in the buildings. I mean, the windows weren't even broken. The supposed maneuver made by this pilot, which was a joke at aircraft school. He couldn't even fly a Cessna. And his instructor refused to go back up with him on his last run, I guess, at school, whatever.
Well, forget about the pilot. It's aerodynamically impossible. Aerodynamically impossible for a jet plane that size to maintain at that altitude and fly straight into that building.
Well, not to mention I think it was a 360 or 180 degree maneuver that circled and came back in and then, skimmed across the ground, at what I've heard that couldn't be maintained because of the updraft, the amount of air beneath the wings that would be required to maintain that altitude, which was very very low. So that of course, precludes any plane. And then we look at the plane that went down in Shanksville, and there's no indication of a plane there, neither. And then go back to New York City with the two towers when they were struck. These planes vaporized. Matter of fact, the whole building's vaporized into dust, and evidence that's been recovered and tested there show, these microparticles of nanothermite and just the idea of these buildings crashing to the ground at free fall speed, even with a pancake theory or the inward sagging theory, you would still have resistance as it encountered each floor of collapse, and there's not enough driving force to pulverize that. And then all the steel's neatly cut pretty much into regular sections, and you see photographic evidence of that. Also, the molten steel. We see videos of witnesses, firefighters, first responders, all credible people, people that had worked inside as maintenance for a great many years. Talking about explosions down in the basement. Just so much. And this is the world that we live in, based upon what has happened on that day 13 years ago. So not only in America but the entire world is affected, and it's gone on to this big old coup, this military-industrial complex. We see people that are responsible for the decisions there, and we can trace them all back to this two-headed monster between Israel and the United States. One then confuses their religious ideology, and man, it's crazy to think that people are so little thinking that they can continue to endorse the way that things are being going on today.
Yeah, I find that this is what really counts to me, is the residual effects later that we're still confronted by. Well over a decade again later, we're still involved in these adventures in the Middle East, where I say we don't belong. Colby's point is well taken, though. The culture over there is different. It is not conducive to what it is that we would generally accept necessarily regarding certain things. But I also contend that some of that has been blown out of proportion because, extremist acts have occurred in all sorts of cultures. I mean, let's not forget that, a lot of the acts of terrorism and things like that occurred, like say in Southeast Asia, these were not Muslims of any kind. These were Buddhists fighting back against the Catholic regimes, which we had put into place, utilizing our own intelligence agencies. Religion, to me, is more of an instrument of division and a convenient excuse to pit people against each other. This is the way I see it, anyway. I mean, I don't know if you see that the same way, Colby, but I also know that you have different experiences because you were confronted by some of these people while you were experiencing what you were over there in the desert. Let's just say
the culture over there is very. The best way to describe the way they live in Afghanistan and in Iraq and many places is to think of like. Movies like the Ten Commandments, where they're in mud huts that are multi-stack mud huts, they're in some straight up, when you see the memes that float around that say, let's bomb them back to the 17th century, they're not joking. I mean, they live that way. They live in the time of Christ, except for the fact that they have motor vehicles and they have some electricity and technology. They still do live in mud huts. It's not a joke. It's not a fallacy. I've got video of it from me flying around up there. So when they're thought of as barbarians, it's not a fallacy. It's a true fact. I mean, but the thing I always thought when I came back was, when's this coming here? And it's honestly like we've got the BBC warning everyone that Russia said, hey, if America starts getting involved in Syria, we're going to have a problem. Do we really want to put Putin against Obama? Because I'm not saying Putin's a good guy, but he doesn't care. That's the problem. He doesn't care. His people will back him because they're bred to do so. And in this country, we used to keep most of our wealth, and we don't do it anymore. Being helpful is cool, and it is. Being a voluntarianist is really, really amazing. But it's not even that we have anymore. What we have is so many bleeding hearts that really could focus locally and make real change local, and they could constrain themselves to local. But instead, what do? They jump on a bandwagon to go for, and no offense to either of these sides, but Palestine, or to starving children in Africa. But they can't fix the poverty, the drug use, the veterans' discrimination, the veterans' lack of actual protection. I mean, they can't do any of this stuff locally, when they really could if they actually absorbed that energy and used it local. It's sad, man. It's really sad, because we always want to focus on that. But it's not something we need to focus on. We need to bring the troops home, and I will repeat this and repeat this and repeat this. We have to bring them home, point them outward, and say, look, we have got a systemic issue where people don't have skills or jobs to use, because we're destroying jobs, we're destroying everything. We have to focus on ourselves for a while, because we've been the world police for over 100 years. It doesn't work anymore.
I agree with you there. 361, you're on the air. Hey, Michael.
Hey, listen. I just want to say, keep the focus on the money. The Muslims may be, scary and barbaric and backwards compared to us, but they're way the hell over there. Take a javelin missile for an example. Those things cost like $80,000 a piece. The guy who fires it won't make $80,000 that year, and the guy he fires it at won't make $80,000 in his lifetime. They're not going to all pack up and get over here, and if they do, they had help, and that's from the legislators that we have that have made the laws that enable everybody in the world to come here unfettered. And it's not just here; it's everywhere in the world. So I mean, we're blaming the fever for the root cause of the infection.
You know what? I absolutely agree with you. Is what it all comes down to at the end of the day is those who actually win in this struggle here, and really, it's only the money men who win, because after all, you have to pay to manufacture those missiles. You have to pay to manufacture the stuff they blow up. To reconstruct.
Somebody's got to run the financing to buy them missiles. Somebody's got to run a contract that says, okay, now we're going to buy 10,000 of these things.
Mike's correct. I mean, it's a digital world, man.
I've got to add in that this is the way the whole system's set up to run, is because of the fiat money supply, this Federal Reserve notes, is that in order to perpetuate that and keep adding it into the supply, because otherwise it'll collapse, you've got to spin. And the best way to do that is by rebuilding that which is destroyed. So, or replace what is used up. So you've got to keep on with that. And this is the whole ideology of the way the world works today. And this is the problem. It's not the problem of whether one person has a left or a right viewing paradigm, but the fact that that the system keeps these systems in play. So when you play to either side, then you're playing the game that's set up for you to play. So you got to quit playing the game, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, Vince, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, look at what's pushed in the media at every point. We have nothing but Arabs being the bad guys at every point on every TV show.
Yeah,
so we have to dehumanize an enemy, and right now they're the enemy because they live on a bunch of resources, and, well, if you eliminate them, that kind of benefits Israel because they've got their own little agenda, They don't want a strong Iraq. They definitely don't want a strong Iran. They don't want a strong Syria. They want a tame Jordan, and they want an Egypt that's, doing exactly what they say. They already work hand in hand with Saudi Arabia.
I could chime in on Egypt, actually. I'm not going to name any names because it's not a good idea, but one of my bosses while I was in the military that was a good friend of mine and me communicate still, and he was actually on orders for peacekeeping in Egypt 6 months before the regime change and all the riots and stuff broke out. So, I mean, we've dabbled our hands in a lot of stuff, boys, as a government, and we do it in two different ways, and it's getting kind of fishy, in my opinion. It's really we just keep dabbling, and then we have to go take care of the problem. It's
got to be beyond fishy because we've got enough money to go to war, but like we don't have enough money to fund school lunches.
But it's a fait accompli that what happens here and what has been the established program is that the intelligence community assets first lay the groundwork before we put, these quote-unquote boots on the ground. This has always been the case, and, we're just now coming into an age where we're starting to understand this a lot better. Of course, we had... there was definitely intelligence people that were involved in setting up for the, does anybody remember what they called the Arab Spring? The destabilization of areas is strategically done for a reason. And all this stuff is laid out by the most dangerous head of the, Hydra, as it were, in my opinion, which is the intelligence community. And they are completely incestuous with one another. To try and draw lines between different ones sometimes, I think, is almost ludicrous because they're all in bed with one another, You guys still with me?
I'm still here. I was taking a bathroom break real quick.
I was taking a 420 break, motherfucker. What's up?
I'm with you on what you're saying right there, but my main thing is at the end of it all, no matter what's going on, you have to look at who benefits, and it's always the money men. It is always the money men, or it is the money men in conjunction with Israel. Nothing bad happens to Israel. WikiLeaks has a billion leaks. Nothing bad comes out about Israel unless it's like something we already know, like Israel sometimes isn't nice to puppies. The wars in the Middle East, every one of them benefits Israel. ISIS is the worst thing in the world, and they're going to, next thing you know, they're going to behead Nebraska. But didn't they just release a statement saying that Allah forbids them to attack Israel? It follow the money and follow who doesn't get hurt, who always benefits, and it always comes back to the same thing.
Yeah, it's always the international banking community, and those who profit off of war, in my opinion, and of course the state of
Israel are fulfilled at every turn.
And the state of Israel benefits on both ends, generally speaking. So, can't argue with you.
Think about the financial portion of this, though. I mean, who was just, we had, how many countries? We had, I think it was Saudi Arabia, possibly Iran, Russia, and how many countries that were looking to move off the dollar, off the petro, fiat currency BS, and back onto gold or silver. Mexico was one of them all, so they're looking at silver right now. And, we've got Bitcoin getting shoved down our throat. We've got all this different stuff all over the place happening. But all the other countries that were supposedly against at this point in time are doing what? Collapsing our dollar.
What was going on in Argentina exactly when 9/11 was happening? Argentina's economy was collapsing. They had an equivalent of the 1933 stock market collapse in Argentina exactly when 9/11 was happening. And then let's just go back to September 10th. And what was the big statement from Rumsfeld? The $2.3 trillion is missing, and then the plane that hits the Pentagon or whatever hits the Pentagon happens to hit in the accounting office, where they're actually looking at the paperwork for that right then and there. It's all about the money.
At the end of the day, that's exactly what it is. It's all about the money. And it is, again, a question of qui bono, who benefits, very simple. And can't argue with you there. I mean, like I say, the international banking cartels always benefit from this kind of stuff. This is what they do. This is how brushfire warfare...
Any kind of energy place that, oh my God, we have to counter jihad, or Islam is coming, or, a Hindu guy or a Muslim guy just bought the KFC down the street. I think that's just pissing in the wind. Go ahead and you're screaming at the boogeyman.
Yep, I do agree with you there. I do agree with you there that regardless of the cultural differences or religious differences, these are all distraction. It's all about the profiteering at the end of the day. And this is why I say that I have no use for either side of that paradigm at this point, because I can't find any of them that don't profit in one way or another. We had our hopes when it came to Ron Paul, let's just say, at one point there, but let's be honest, he still had to work within the framework of the Republican Party, didn't he, in order to get any attention, and had that stolen out from under him as well.
I live in Ron Paul's former district. We're probably one of the poorest areas in the nation. It's all a scam. It's all a scam. Well, we don't have anything down here. We've got factories that belch out cancer and reap massive profits. We got a population that's got step and a half disease at probably 30% greater than anywhere else in the country. We get cancer clusters like other states or other counties collect like high school football trophies.
Yeah, well, I used to see this very same thing in New Jersey because we had some of the highest cancer clusters in the nation at one point, and not necessarily all in the poor areas, but I mean just based on the corporate greed that came into play when it came to,
That's it right there, and it doesn't matter if it's Ron Paul Republicanism or Ron Paul Libertarianism or, Dennis Kucinich style left wing liberal freedom-mindedness, whatever. It's all a big scam. If you're working within the system is designed to screw us. And 9/11 was the reinforcing of that. That was the door shutting behind you. You're now in the front house.
Well, you and I see eye to eye a lot more than I thought we did. I got to tell you, because I'm on the same page as you. This is exactly what I see. And I'm waiting for somebody to tell me that it's different because, I don't want the world to be this way, but this is what we're confronted with as far as I'm concerned. So trying to actually seek out the individuals responsible, I think is something that would be much better a use of time for those who are involved in the research on this. You know what I mean?
I'd like to disagree with you, Chuck.
Okay, go ahead.
On that right there, because there's nothing that can be done because all the evidence. I'm getting pinged. All the evidence is gone. They destroyed the evidence right away. There's no way that an actual criminal case can be brought against anybody. Any crucial witnesses, all the witnesses, so many of them that died, all the evidence is gone. So that's not going to happen. I think it's more important to be able to somehow be able to discuss to a point that people are willing to consider this information. Because why people don't, I think, is because it goes against their entire paradigm. And when one examines the entire system, this mechanical beast in operation here, the corporatocracy, then it'd mean that everything that they've worked for, everything that they thought they knew, they believed in, they loved, their whole life is wrong. And that's a pretty hard cookie to swallow right there.
Vince, you are so on the ball. You are so 100% correct. It shakes their foundation to the point where they threw their pants.
And when we thought in somebody's face in the wrong way, nobody hears nothing because, you're insulting their intelligence. Then it gets thrown back at you, something like, oh, you're a one of them damn idiot truthers or conspiracy theorists or whatever. And then, you get your feelings hurt. You want to throw some more stuff back. Say it again.
I said, how's your tinfoil hat?
Man, mine's great.
Yeah, that's what you get accused of.
Yeah, exactly. But, hey, who's to say tinfoil hats don't work? Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah, I always like to say I want to apologize for ever making that joke in my previous life before I decided to open my eyes fully. Because, you did need your tinfoil hat, and the CIA was actually beaming things into your brain. I'm very, very sorry, gentlemen. So, it's...
I don't know that's not happening. It's not happening to me as far as I know. Shut up. I'm talking.
Right.
Who? Who are you talking to? You.
Well, I mean, like, in the end of it all, somebody got to fund those mind control ray machines. Somebody's got to pay that. Somebody's got to pay the guy who operates it. Once again, everything goes back to the money. And with that, gentlemen, I'm going to cut off and listen online. I really appreciate the chance to rant. Thanks a lot.
No,
thanks, Amy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you. And anytime, call me back.
Always nice talking with you, Mike.
You know, and I gotta say, yeah, I agree with that. I'm just saying that that you know, the effort to really call out the people that are truly responsible, though, is worthwhile. It's not a matter of are we ever going to get a criminal case? No, we're not, in my opinion, especially not in the direction that we're going in with all this. You know, unless we can actually prove that there were people that had their hands on the situation directly. You know what I mean? And
well, I'd like to add, there's a good case presented for calling people out. Let's see, I'll see if I can find it, and I'll pull it up. I put a few videos that I watched today together, and then I'll drop that off in chat. But an obvious conspiracy existed by several people over a great amount of time that all come together at 9/11. I mean, it's just way beyond coincidence. And all these people that have worked on past projects together, where some of them worked against certain organizations in a public capacity, and then afterwards went to work for those that they prosecuted against and stuff. Obvious payoffs, obvious cronyism, and anybody that really takes a look at government, that's about what it exists as anyway. So it should be no surprise that this is how things happened and come about and come about every day, and the power behind you know, the movement and the direction of policy for the world. And you know, there's obviously got to be people that are conspiring to put this together, whether it be for good or bad, and whether their perception of whether what they're doing is good or bad, you know, you might debate that, and especially if they're a sociopath or a psychopath. So you know, they might not have any compunction about doing evil deeds to a great many people just to further whatever their agenda is, or a possible agenda that would, you know, exist that a lot of people would be involved in trying to bring about. And if there's illegal action, then that by default of definition is conspiracy. So you know, there's been conspiracy, obviously, and that's my case.
I love hearing the crickets in his background.
You can too, yeah.
Chuck, are you
so
still
let
here?
me see.
yeah, to conspire means to breathe together. Okay, this is where it comes from, the Latin phrase for that. And there's obviously a conspiracy here, as far as I'm concerned, and there is, it's way too obvious. And like you said, there are many people that worked on many projects. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm looking into something now, which I find kind of frightening. Okay, because for many years I didn't really want to believe the thermate or thermite explanation. However, it seems as though it's a little more real than I wanted to imagine. To be honest with you, there's so much evidence regarding that, and there is a lot of evidence regarding, you know, the people that shook hands, and of course you know, the bailouts of the insurance companies that followed, and on and on and on. We can actually find plenty of real people to lay our hands on, and I just don't go for the whole, you know, thing with blaming Bush or, well, Cheney's another animal entirely as far as I'm concerned, but to blame W on this, I don't think that he was pulling anybody's strings that day. I think he was just along for the ride. But
yeah. I think he is getting his strings pulled. Hey, I'm going to drop this off in the chat.
I don't think he was intelligent enough, yeah.
Hey, this is from Tom Lacavar, and I spent quite a bit of time with him out in Bunkerville. This is a good guy right here. I believe him to be an honest guy, and he's got a lot of the same understandings that most of us here may have. But anyways, I dropped that video off in there, and that's he's representing. I forget the guy in there, but anyways, they tie it all together right there in a short amount of time. You know, if I had one choice to listen to, I think that this would be it. If you was condensed for time, I mean, you know, hard on time, spend an hour right here, and this right here will lay it all out for you. And you can search that on YouTube as 9/11 was an inside job by RTR Truth Media. Tom Lacovara, Lacovara.
all right, thank you, Vince.
You bet.
Really
Thanks,
appreciate
brother.
it.
I'm going to get off here and listen to you close out the show. It's good to be on with you, Chuck. Miss radio, but I'm still
Seems as though Vince broke up there. I've added in Daniel Lewis Crumpton.
Greetings, gentlemen.
Hey, greetings. And also, hello, Jimmy.
Good evening, Chuck.
So happy you could join me tonight, to be honest with you. And we're running low on time here, but I wanted to let both of you gentlemen have your say. That's for sure, because we got about, I think, 25 minutes left here.
Well, go ahead and let Daniel go first. I'll save mine to the end, because it's pretty final.
Wow, okay. Daniel, I always love your worldview on things. We have never really discussed 9/11 between us, but I'm curious to see how you see things, and please, sir, the floor is yours.
You know, Chuck, before I came on, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say because there's so many aspects to 9/11 that we could discuss. And ironically, right before, my mom was doing laundry, and she stepped on a thorn, and she needed me to get it out with a pair of tweezers. And suddenly I had a flash from my childhood when I was like 5 or 6. Whenever I would get a sticker or something like that in my foot, it goes so deep, she would have to get a needle to dig it out. And, of course, my body would tense up, and I'd be afraid of more pain when I saw the needle. And she would tell me, if I don't get it out, son, if you don't let me do this, then a tree is going to grow out of your foot. And then immediately I could see that in my imagination. And the terror of that allowed my body and my mind to submit to what she was trying to get me to do. Because of a fairy tale, a story that was told to me, actions were brought about that I felt compelled to submit to. And I think that 9/11, it's been 13 years. I don't think that anybody who's on this show or anybody who's listening has any doubt that on every level it was an inside job. I don't think it's taboo to say that anymore. There's enough evidence out there for anybody who has an inquiring mind to get the evidence and realize that this was not some random act. This was a fairy tale that was told to get not only this country, but this world to submit to an agenda. All of us know that. So I don't want to go over any of that personally because, to me, I think everybody who's here is educated enough to already be at that point. And since it is 13 years later, I think the question really needs to be, where do we go from here? So it's been 13 years of war and trauma and financial scams and boogeymen. So, all right, we all know that. All of us here know that. And we're the tip of the spear. So I think that what we have to do is really examine where we go from here to undo what's been done. I think that's the most important question to ask 13 years later, personally.
Absolutely, Daniel. I think you're dead on. You know, I still have this need to want to expose the truth, but you're right. It is a matter of how we need to move forward. You know, I don't see how anybody could argue with that. I don't know about you two gentlemen, besides myself and Daniel here, but I have no argument with what he just said.
No, he's pretty right on. I mean, everybody's going to think about it differently. It depends on your perspective, what you saw that day, what you heard that day, how far you've taken your investigation. Some people didn't, you know. Some people still believe the narrative, and they still believe everything that Bronco had to say, everything that W had to say, everything that Cheney had to say, everything. You know, this is my take on 9/11, 13 years later. And then I'll let you close out your show, Chuck.
Okay.
I cannot believe that you people in this country, now I'm speaking in general terms, so nobody throw rocks or anything. I cannot believe that you people in this country are falling for the same goddamn story over again. And this one, it's not just going to be some little incident that happened in the U.S., although 9/11 wasn't really that little. This propaganda push that all of the sheeple out there are listening to and believing and beating on their war drums and waving their flags again, this one's going to lead us into World War III, people.
Preach it.
You know, it is exactly what it is I'm trying to warn about here, is that we are, again, confronted with the same, the same MO. We're confronted with, again, the same type of building up of a boogeyman. And this is exactly what I want everybody to try and reject, because this is going to lead us down nothing but a darker path if we continue with this.
It's too late. Look at the poll numbers. Like 63% of the UK are ready to go in and stomp the shit out of everybody. Over 50% of the US are ready to go in and stomp the shit out of everybody over there. It's too late, man. It's too late. It's too late.
I got a good point on this one.
Go ahead.
I've got a friend that's semi-progressive liberal. His parents fled from Cambodia to here during the communist massacres that were going on there.
During the Pol Pot regime and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a good kid. He's a smart kid. But he's going to Arizona Tech, or the state of Arizona, and he's so back and forth. He's like a neoconservative progressive. It's so weird. But he was like, why would you run against this war? They're killing Christians. And he's an atheist. And I'm like, it's not the fact of killing Christians. It's the fact that we never should have gotten involved at all. It's not our place to do this stuff anymore. We have to come back and reflect on what we've done for the last 100 years and think logically, because it's not working. And Chuck, like you said, Ron Paul was that question of why are we doing this? Is it benefiting us financially? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's dependent, but we can't be the world police anymore. And Ron Paul had it right. I didn't believe in isolationism, as they called it, what Ron Paul was. That's what their BS line was. But I tell you what, the guy had it right. You bring him home, you point him outward, and you grow your economy locally, and you hold on to it, and you don't actually keep doing the Democratic part or the Republican part of screwing with corporations. Let them be. Screw the EPA, BLM, all of them. Let them go. Get rid of them. Do the right thing. Constitutionally. But it doesn't happen. And at that, I'm on an end here.
That's not part of the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
I was listening to what Jimmy said, and I'm going to have to respectfully disagree that it's too late and that it's over. When we do ask the question, where do we go from here? I always use my parents as analogies, but my father used to question. He would say, "Son, I don't understand if there's a God. Why is there suffering in the world?" Having been a veteran, and it wasn't until after his passing and I began to grow spiritually, where I understood the maxim of as above, so below, as within, so without, and I finally had an answer from my father. The reason that there is suffering in the world is because there is suffering within. Each of us are a part, or we're interconnected on a massively conscious level. And if we have the mentality that it's too late and that it's doomed, then we'll pre-program ourselves into inaction. If you tell a cancer patient that they have cancer, they have 6 months to live, and they choose to believe you, then it's more likely that cancer is going to spread because it's obeying the conscious mind. And I think that if we each stop and look within ourselves on an individual level and realize, no, it's not too late. There are plenty of things that can be done. We just have to trust that there's a bigger force that's going to lead us down that path. So I'm going to have to disagree with you. I don't think that it's too late. I think that the very fact that this conversation is happening tonight with as many people that have been on is proof positive that it is exactly the opposite of what you said, and I respect your opinion. But I believe that, now it's 13 years later, if each of us stop fighting for freedom, and I know that sounds insane. You don't have to fight for freedom. You just claim it. You go look in the mirror and say, I am free. When you convince yourself of that, it will tend to spread to people around you. Like, this discussion could not have happened 5 years ago with as many people that are here, but the fact that it's been exponential in the past few years is proof that it is not too late. It's not too late. We can turn this around. So I respect you, but that's just my 2 cents.
I seriously believe in what he just said. That was good. It was seriously, that was awesome, man.
Well, it absolutely strikes upon exactly why it is I do the shows I do. to try and create at least the smallest shift in the consciousness that I can, whether it's one person or it's a handful of people or however many people decide to tune into me on a particular day. If I can begin to change the consciousness, I know that that all else can follow it. This is exactly why I do what I do. And you know, Jimmy, I understand what you're saying, but you know I've always been a little more hopeful about this stuff than you. And I want you to be wrong. I just want you to know that. I want you to be dead wrong.
I want me to be wrong too, man, but I'm just a realist.
That's understandable. Can I add this in, Chuck?
Sure, go ahead.
Everyone was talking tonight about the many facets about 9/11. It's the Federal Reserve, it's the Vatican, it's Israel, it's America. But let me illustrate this. Last night, me and my nephew were out in my Zen garden, which is made up of several, hundreds of thousands of small stones, and then larger stones. In the middle, there's a giant yin-yang, and when I come out and rake it or mess around with it, I move the stones in different formations. And we were sitting there, and we were talking about 9/11, and I said, most people in the world have their nose, on the ground, so they can only see a couple of interconnected stones. And because they have their nose close to the ground and they're focusing on individual stones, like, say, the Federal Reserve or the Israeli government or religion, they're only going to be able to see so much of the picture. But what we have to do individually and what we have to do globally and, as a country is we have to, like I told him, I said, but true knowers, rather than have their nose on the ground and only see a few pebbles, true knowers climb the tree. And from up there, they can see that there's a giant garden with a giant pattern in the middle, and therefore they can affect more change. So I respect everybody who says it's all about the money or it's all about governmental powers or corruption, but it's really about control overall through many different facets. So what I would ask everybody, especially now looking at 9/11, is try to connect all of these things. No, it is not all about the money. No, it is not all about religion. No, it is not all about international bankers and fiat currency. All of these things are interconnected, like a spider web. So in order for us to move forward, what we're going to have to do is to be able to connect these dots to people who aren't where we're at yet. People who still think that it was guys with box cutters. Just connect some dots. Don't get hostile with them. A little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. You don't want to choke people on too much information. Just give them the beginning of the breadcrumb. So I'd like to say that about, what was 9/11 about. 9/11 was really about, look, it's two towers, left brain, right brain, and in the middle was Tower 7. People are now catching on to the pineal gland, your connection with everyone else around you in a higher force. It's symbolism. Why would they destroy the left brain, right brain, and the pineal gland? To cause trauma-based mind control, to fracture the consciousness of the globe. So how do we stop it? How do we push back? Well, as above, so below, as within, so without. Start to cultivate that within yourself. Don't walk out your door paranoid every day. Don't look at negative news and videos of police brutality 24 hours a day. Inject your consciousness with some beauty. Inject it with good music. Change yourself. Raise your consciousness if you're going to raise the consciousnesses of those around you. I know some people in the liberty movement who are becoming exactly like the federal government. They're so paranoid. They're recording everything. And, people in the liberty movement are fracturing because everybody wants to have their own church, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Certainly does to me.
I'm catching up what you're picking down, and I'm just jumping in back and forth. I got kids too, so.
Well,
can I correct you on a couple things?
I'm sure Jimmy has something to say about this. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, it's pronounced pineal gland, and yin and yang is the symbol from ancient. How old are you, by the way? Let me just throw that. I know you were over in theater, right? You said you were over in theater?
No.
No, Colby was in theater.
Oh, Colby was in theater. Okay, my bad. How old are you, brother?
What's the significance? Is that going to quantify me?
It's just a question. It's just a question. I want to know how much world experience you have.
I turned 34 on the 2nd of this month.
Okay.
Tell me happy birthday, man. Come on.
Happy birthday, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yes, happy birthday, Dan.
Appreciate it.
I think there's some more going on right now than you're adding into your equation. I think there's a lot more financial things happening on the planet that you're not throwing into your equation. And those things that are taking place at this very moment as we speak are going to lead to the destruction of this country and the destruction of the dollar. That is a given. It is going to happen. And I'm guessing it's probably going to happen before Christmas. So, knowing that, how would you change your perspective?
I would say you create your own reality, man. Civilizations rise and civilizations fall. How they go about it is the integrity of the people. You know, if that were to happen, hey, look.
If you're talking about America, brother, that's sucking hind titty. Because the integrity of this country, the majority of this country, is in the shitter.
Well, here's a great quote, actually. I gave you a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
If you can keep it. People don't even know what the fuck a republic is. I'm talking to congressmen from my own state. I'm sorry I use the F-bomb, but this really gets me passionate, because it's like, a Republican congressman who's been in office since a couple years after I was born called the country a democracy. He knows better, and then he actually sat there and I was like, it's not a democracy, it's a republic. And he's like, well, I've got my constitution. I was like, you better start reading that, buddy. Start reading it. And this is a Republican.
Here's what I would just say. If it's inevitable that, the phosphorus is going to come out of the butterfly or whatever, I would say that anybody who has kids out there better make sure that the children that they have know what a republic is. And make sure that your friends' children know what a republic is, because if the current republic is going to fall, we need to inject what a republic is into the next generation.
How about getting away from the whole left-right paradigm? How about getting away from the whole Democratic-Republican paradigm? How about not having a government? How about just living by rules and not having a ruler over the top of you? Try that for a change.
Well, it doesn't happen, and I agree with that as well, but we've got about 3 minutes left.
You guys were just telling me that anything can happen. You guys were just telling me that anything can happen. So why can't anarchy happen?
It could, but right now it's on a left paradigm. It's on a shift because everyone was so upset with Obama.
I think it's the circles that you hang around. Most of the people that I surround myself with, they're beyond some of these concepts. I mean, now if I were to go down, into certain districts of my city, say to a Republican meeting, they're still in that mind frame. I just choose not to be around those people. I choose to be around people who are looking at the bigger picture, because that's where you're going to find your solutions. That's where you're going to find the people who can enact change with knowledge. I don't hang around them. I don't listen to Sean Hannity anymore because he's not where I'm at. He's connecting one aspect of this puzzle, and it's just politics. He's not connecting it with other aspects of philosophy or spirituality or science. He's not doing that. He's catering to a specific audience. So I would say stay away from those people, because they're bringing you down. They're making you think that we're doomed.
Just to warn you guys really quickly, we only got about 3 minutes left, so I wanted to try and get in whatever it is you guys wanted to lay out. Oh, wait a minute.
Whoops. Peace, brother. I'm out.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening. Go ahead, get back.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, crystals and fondle slab of choice. I don't know what that was. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from, as long as it's real. It's hard to get real these days, because seriously, they don't want you to